Begin.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, May 8th, 2024, about 2:06 p.m. For our monthly towing task force meeting. We can go ahead and get started by calling roll. Go ahead and start with that. So let's start with John Connolly. I have not seen him yet. Captain Hahn.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Jennifer Henson.
I'm here.
Thank you. Jim Howes. I've not seen him yet. Dr. Pierce. Not seen him yet either. Officer Prunsky. Not seeing him yet. Mr. Rich.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Reister. Not seeing him yet. Nathan Riley, that's myself. I am present. Joyanne Rusha. I don't know if she's in yet. And Edward Schoenheit. Not seeing him yet either. So we have 4 members present. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 not here yet, but may have some trickling in. So we'll go ahead and just move forward and see who all we get. If we're able to get a quorum, and yes, Mr. Rich, thank you for your commentary about your availability. Hopefully we can get a few more in here so we can approve the previous meeting minutes and some other things. But we'll see. We'll kind of just see what happens. All right. Go ahead and moving on. Let me pull up the agenda real quick. Okay. So did our roll call. Again, approval of the meeting minutes. We have 3 previous meeting minutes to approve. Those being February 28th, March 13th, and April 10th meeting minutes. Do not currently have a quorum though, so we'll go ahead and skip that for now. If we do end up getting a quorum, we'll go ahead and circle back to that. But for now, we'll go ahead and move on to a few administrative items. So to start, Hadija has been getting some pressure from the department to make sure that the people from our group, as well as all the different other boards and commissions throughout the department and overseen by the department, to do the department mandated OIT trainings. Some of you may have already received some emails about this, but basically it's a series of trainings, and I remember taking them last year when the department was asking us to take them then. It's not too difficult to just sign up for a quick account and log in and do them. I think it took me 30 minutes altogether to do everything that was being requested. So it's not too time intensive. It's not too laborious either to go through it, but it hits on some pretty important issues. You know, things like, you know, acceptable use of state data and IT resources, security awareness for contractors, which is like some of the different boards and commissions, you know, phishing, remote work security, password management, stuff like that. So it's important stuff to know just in general, you know, navigating our current digital age. So definitely would encourage you all to do that as soon as you can. If you didn't get or you haven't seen any emails from the department about that, please reach out to Hadija and she can get you the information that you need in order to you know, the links or whatever to go to these particular vendors and take this training. Again, it is required for all the different boards and commissions that are overseen by the department. So please make sure that you do that if you have not already. Again, I'll be signing up. It's like an annual thing. So you'll do it this year, you would do it next year, you know, anytime that, as many times as you are still on the towing task force. So just please be aware of that. Please do that. And again, if you haven't received any information or any emails from the department about that, just reach out to Hadija and ask her about that, and she'll make sure to get you what you need to do that. Okay, let's see. I think that was the only administrative update I had. I see we do also have the director of Copper with us again today, Brian Tobias. Do you have any updates you'd like to provide in relationship to the towing sunset review?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Good afternoon, everyone. So based on my observations of this group for the last couple of months, I know you've all been aware and watching the progress of House Bill 1051 that did pass on third reads this week. So now it should be going to the governor, as far as I know, as being the next step. A key element of that bill is to postpone the sunset review of the PUC's regulation of towing by about 5 years. So we're suspending the sunset review of the PUC's regulation of towing. However, the sunset review of the towing task force remains in place. So I'm still going to be conducting that review. And so I will still be attending your meetings. I'll still be reaching out to you individuals, members of the task force. But the review is much more limited now than it was before. Whereas before we were really taking a comprehensive look at towing and the regulation of towing in the state. Now the review is really limited to should we continue or allow the task force to sunset. Those are the two recommendations I can make. So give that some thought, and I'll be reaching out to you all here in the next couple of weeks so we can schedule a time to talk if you're interested. If you're not interested in talking, if you could at least let me know that, I'd appreciate it so I can take you off my list. But that's all. I just kind of wanted to give you that update, and I will now fade into the background and continue observing. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Director. Definitely appreciate that update and that feedback. And yeah, we will look forward to hearing from you on an individual basis on some of those topics. Okay, I think that wraps up the administrative updates and items that we wanted to get discussed today. So we can go ahead and move on to the agenda. I went ahead and marked two, I guess, continuing discussion points. These are things we've discussed in previous meetings, even recent previous meetings. You know, some of the larger topics we've discussed, you know, as we go around on, you know, discussing the maximum rates for non-consensual tows, and you know what potential recommendations we might want to make to the PUC on how those could potentially be adjusted. So those 2 points being, you know, a continued discussion on the current categories of the PUC's pre-approved rates, or the PUC's approved tow rates. So I know in one of our previous meetings, you know, I had gone through some of the, well, all of the different categories that the PUC sets rates for. So that includes the drop charges, which, again, you know, based on, you know, the tow legislation 2 years ago, you can't charge that anymore per state law for residential private property impounds. So if somebody was to do a non-consensual tow from, you know, an apartment complex or condominium or some kind of an HOA governed community, those are residential in nature and therefore would not be eligible for any drop fees or charges. Nevertheless, it is still an available charge for other types of private property impounds, like commercial. So, you know, someone gets home from towed as a non-consensual tow from Home Depot or something like that. There's still a base level charge that can be assessed if the vehicle is in the process of being towed, but has not actually been removed from the origination address, wherever the origination private property is. So that's one category of charges that the PUC regulates. You have just the flat, what we refer to as the base rate or the hook fee for a private property impound. So that's your general non-consensual tow. Could be residential, could be commercial. And it is broken out by weight class in different ranges or bands, you know, but like 10,000 GVWR or less, 10,001 to 19,000 pounds, 19,001 to 33,000 pounds, and then 33,001 or greater is typically the range that's used for a lot of these different rates. But anyway, the base rate or the hook fee for a private property impound falls under one of those categories, again, based on the weight class of the towed vehicle. And so it's broken out that way, and it kind of includes the all-encompassing tow exercise from, responding to the tow, hooking the vehicle, transporting it back to storage, and placing it in storage. All of that goes along with that particular charge. It's all kind of rolled into that one charge instead of being split up into, dollies and winches and some other things that it used to be set up with. So those are the first two categories. Then you have mileage and fuel surcharge. The mileage is a stagnant rate, and it's been the same $3.80 for long time that I can think back. But then the fuel surcharge is the one that updates monthly, and it kind of uses a similar standard that we use with the annual inflation adjustment. In that case, we use the PPI, or excuse me, the CPI, but for the fuel surcharge, it's actually based on diesel fuel prices at any given time in any given month. And so we update it on a monthly basis. It's on a chart on our website, so you can see the current monthly rate and then going all the way back to, I think, like 2015 or 2014. So you can see what it was every month during that entire range. Obviously, when fuel prices were lower, in some cases there was no fuel surcharge, and it was just that $3.80 base rate for the mile. But since gas prices have gone up over the last few years, it's been above that most of the time. Then you have so that's another category of charge that the PUC regulates. Then you have the law enforcement ordered tow and recovery. So basically anything that's either a law enforcement ordered tow or a recovery operation. So like if somebody, goes off the side of the road into, a ravine or something up in the mountains or along the mountain range, that would be a recovery operation because you're actually recovering the vehicle, which may even have passengers inside of it. So we have that broken out in a similar way to the PPI hook fee, but in a way where it's on an hourly rate as opposed to a flat rate for the entire tow action. Then obviously you have storage. That's broken up into a few categories based on the weight of the vehicle or the length of the vehicle. There's a couple different options the towing carrier can invoke. After hours fees. So if there's a tow that is going to be released to an authorized or interested person at a time other than the tow carrier's regular business hours or standard business hours, they could assess that fee. And then finally, statutory notification, which is basically whether you're towing a vehicle from public or private property, the rate is different, but as long as the statutory notification process has been completed, that being running the VIN search and also sending out the certified mailings, then you can assess that fee as well. So in all, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different categories of tows. Now, again, given that we are bound by the statute to make recommendations regarding the maximum rates for non-consensual tows. Again, I think in the past we were able to lump law enforcement ordered tow rates into that, but I know we've talked about this in the past, but I'm not so sure we can still do that. But notwithstanding that issue, we could definitely offer recommendations in regards to the drop charge category, the PPI base rate or hook fee, the mileage fuel surcharge, storage, and after hours. That's 5 different categories that we could certainly weigh in on, if not more. So anyway, just kind of wanted to continue our discussion on that. If we think that range of those 5 categories, again, if we're talking specifically about non-consensual PPI style tows, if we think that kind of captures everything, I don't know, maybe we think we need to add another category or get rid of one of the existing categories. I know we've talked about this a bit, but just wanted to make sure there wasn't any other continuing discussion or conversation anybody wanted to have on whether or not, at least in regards to the specific tow categories, if it's fully capturing what we might think is appropriate for a non-consensual tow. So anybody have any thoughts on that? Yes, Ms. Rusha.
Hi, Mr. Raleigh. I was just wondering if you thought we should tackle these categories like one by one over our future meetings, or if you had a sense of how we would plan those conversations. Or I should say schedule, schedule them like, according to our agenda so we can be prepared.
I mean, I guess I didn't really think we'd split them up. I mean, we could just kind of talk about it as a whole, because at the end of the day, all these different categories of tow services, which then in turn have set maximum rates or fees that go along with these particular services, you compile them all together, and that's what equals the tow bill that somebody sees when they get towed, and then they go to the tow carrier to get their vehicle back. It's all continued out. Now, it should be broken out on the tow invoice what they're being charged for these different categories. So if they're being assessed an after hours fee, that should be listed as its own line item on the invoice. So it would say after hours fee, and whatever that fee is, that's being assessed. Same thing with mileage. It should say, mileage, either the $3.80 per mile if there's no additional fuel surcharge, but if there is a fuel surcharge, then that rate will probably go beyond the $3.80 per mile, and then times however miles for a total charge. Maybe it's $46, let's say. And then same thing with the hook fee. That would be just the flat rate in whatever appropriate weight category. Storage, depending on how long the vehicle had been there. Again, it should all be pretty well broken out on the tow invoice for people to see. If they got, say you got somebody who was, parked somewhere downtown in Denver, and they get towed and they go get their, they go get the vehicle the next, day, let's assume it's a weekday, and they go in there and say, hey, you have my vehicle, and they get this tow invoice. It should be broken out based on these categories with the appropriate fees attached based on whatever the current rates are. And so I don't know, I guess I thought maybe it would be more appropriate to kind of talk a bit about it as a whole. If you split these items up, I think I guess it's a little easier to, yeah, go ahead, Joanne.
Oh, I apologize. I wasn't trying to interrupt. I just wanted to signal that I had a follow-up. So you can
Sure.
continue.
Yep. No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I thought maybe like would it be possible for us to take, like the work that you've already done with a chart and then add another column, but make that a Google Doc for the group if we wanted to add comments as we go along or in the interim? I get for me sometimes it's hard to like process all of this stuff live, and then there's like different categories and we have different fees, like that were based on slightly different reasons. As long as the document was accessible to the public, I don't think it violates open record or open meetings.
Sure. I mean, we could do something like that if y'all want, if that's your preference.
But only if I'm the only person requesting, we don't have to do that. It was just a thought. If
Sure.
others don't think it's necessary, that it would be fine. And
Sure.
then I also like localities can have their own drop fees, right? That can be lower
Right.
than what the PUC sets. And I think that's noted on our website currently, but I just wanted to I guess I just wanted to flag that we should, or actually I wanted to ask, like, aside from Denver, do you know of any other locality that has a different drop free fee, rate? And is that something we could, I don't even know how we would survey that, but is that something we can also make sure we include on information?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any other municipalities outside of Denver that has an alternative. Actually, you know what? Silverthorne might have had one. I don't know if they maybe still do. But yeah, Denver's always been the big one over the years that I've been aware of. And it's been $15, but it's been a while since I've looked at that municipal code. I don't know if it still is, or like if the code even still exists, or if it does, if it's a different rate now. But it was $15 for many years. And we used to get that feedback a lot from towing carriers who were essentially upset that, just because I'm in Denver, I can't charge what the PUC allows. That's not fair. So, we kind of would battle a little bit about that over the years. But basically, we consolidated the PUC's rule language in a way that basically says the maximum rate is, whatever the PUC has set, but also the minimum is 0, which gives that extra latitude that, hey, if there's a municipality where they essentially have it set up like in Denver where it's 15, then you default to the 15. Like, just because the state allows up to an amount that could be considerably more than that doesn't mean that that in and of itself supersedes the municipal desire to have the towing carriers charge less than that. Yeah, Joanne.
Right, and I understand that part. I guess what I was just saying is, like, as we think about, like, our forward facing materials, which are also for consumers, just that, if we happen to know, for example, and Denver still is 15, that there is a lower rate in certain municipalities, that we note that, because I know it is a complaint also from consumers that they get charged the state rate when they should have been charged a local rate for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me share this real quick. I know I was talking about it just now, and I know we've looked at this before, but here's a copy of the current tow sheet. You'll notice that the effective date was just a week or so ago. The reason it got updated again, because we actually went through the annual inflation adjustment back in March. It was on March 15th. We set a new range of rates based on the CPI that took effect for the 2023 calendar year, and that happened in late February. So the PUC went ahead and applied that most recent annual inflation adjustment, and those rates became effective on March 15th. However, we did have to update the rates again on April 30th. And the reason we had to do that is because previously, as part of the commission rules, there was a section here, which has now been removed, that addressed specific rates for post law enforcement ordered tows. So situations such as when there was a stolen vehicle investigation that required the vehicle to be towed again after it was impounded, or accident reconstruction. In those types of situations where law enforcement requests that the vehicle be relocated or moved in order to accommodate one of those two instances, there were particular rates in place that actually had been in place in the rule for a long time, but that actually got stripped out of the rule in the most recent rulemaking, which took effect on April 30th. So basically, the reason that this is now from April 30th instead of March 15th is because we took that section out. Everything else stayed the same then. And speaking of the CPI, this was the rate that we used for the most recent one. It was 5.21%. That was the 2023 CPI. So that was the amount that these rates increased effective on March 15th. So just so everybody's aware. But going back to the earlier conversation, we were talking about the drop charge, which is these rates here in this column. Then you have the base rate, which is the hook fee, which is all of these. And again, they're broken out by weight class in each case. The mileage fuel surcharge we just talked about. So here's the mileage, and then the fuel surcharge. There's too much information to put it all here on this sheet. So we just refer to the chart that we have on our website. Law enforcement ordered tows, again, that's broken out on an hourly charge. Like I talked about before, again, it counts for recovery as well. The storage rates, like I said, is split up into two different weight categories, under 10,000 or 10,000 or more. So that is based on a 24-hour period. And then by length, at the tow carrier's discretion, they can charge up to $175 per foot. And then we talked about the after hours charge, that's here. And the statutory notification. Like I said, there is a difference in the price between a public property tow and a private property tow, but the process is essentially the same for both. So anyway, but yeah, like I said, I wanted to make sure that we at least were pretty settled on the discussion on which rates we as the towing task force think, or rather which categories of rates for a non-consensual tow, so a PPI, are appropriate for the maximum rate. So, I mean, we can obviously have separate conversations for what the maximum rate should be in these different categories. But I guess I thought that making sure we were settled on the current categories and that they're appropriate and we don't need any more categories or less categories than are already available. I think once we make sure we've settled that issue, then it's a little easier, I think, to go into the different rates and not have to backtrack later potentially. So that's kind of where I was coming at from it. But Joyanne, did you want to, I mean, are you thinking something like what you're seeing here on the rate sheet, but in a Google Doc where people can kind of make commentary? Or, I mean, does it even have to be that detailed? I mean, this has all the rates on it, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you made this in a Google Doc, I mean, people can make comments without, you don't have to make a chart. People can just make comments if they had them. But
Mhm.
I had some thoughts and I didn't want to take up the whole meeting, but I also want to process what everyone says, before I jump in. And so that's why I was wondering if there was a way to follow up in a way that was open meetings law compliant. And on other commissions I've sat on, a Google Doc that is publicly available, was one way to do it, when we're dealing with a lot of questions at once.
Sure. I mean, Ms. Roberts, do you have any thoughts on that? If we were to put something that looks kind of similar to what is being shown here, but in some kind of I don't know if it would be limited accessible, like to just the people in our group, or what the situation is, and then essentially put a link to that document, maybe in a view-only format other than the people in this group, that people can go in and make comments or, whatever they want to do. Would there be a problem with doing that? Okay, so no issue. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I don't mind doing that. I can certainly, work on that, or maybe Hadija can work on that, putting something together and getting it up on the website where it's available there for all of us at least to access, and provide our commentary if we have any on some of these topics. And again, since it would be up on the website, really anybody could look at it, but we could probably structure it in a way where we're adding it to the website in a view-only perspective, so that really anybody who's not us can see it, but we're the only ones who can make edits to it. Roberts, Mr. Roberts, it sounds like your mic's working now. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we don't need to talk anymore about that. Like I said, I guess I just wanted. 1 second. So yeah, like I said, I just wanted to make sure at least everybody was on board with, the categories that already exist, and that nobody wanted to potentially come up with any suggested changes to the categories. Yeah, Ms. Risha.
Hi, just a clarifying question. So under where it says law enforcement, order, tow, and recovery, and then those rates, what about when your car, if your car is towed, say because it's parked where it's not supposed to be on a public street, and that's under the local municipality, does that fall under a law enforcement order tow? Because different municipalities have different rates as well.
Yes, so in general, if a vehicle is being towed from public property, like that's the origination point of the tow, that's where the vehicle is when it's being towed. that's going to default to a law enforcement ordered tow. And in fact, pursuant to the statute, it actually, I think, is the only way that a tow can be authorized is by law enforcement, or some other similar mechanism to that. So, we've had conversations over the years with, some of these smaller municipalities that may not have their own police department, and so, we have to come up with solutions to, address abandoned motor vehicle in those areas. So that can be a little difficult just because of the limitations as presented in the statute. But there wouldn't necessarily be an issue if municipalities had their own rates for law enforcement ordered tows. However, they wouldn't be able to exceed the maximum rates that the PUC has set, is my understanding. So I think we offer a lot of latitude to law enforcement agencies and their contractual relationship with licensed towing carriers. However, there are boundaries to that. And so as long as they're not doing something that, with few exceptions, there are exceptions to this, but for the most part, as long as they're not doing anything that explicitly conflicts with either the state statutes that govern towing operations or the PUC's regulations over the towing carriers that they've been charged with overseeing, then I think we tend to get a lot of latitude to those law enforcement contracts.
Okay, because I know in the city of Denver, if your car is improperly parked on a public street, I mean, it's $100, to move the vehicle, and there might be some other charges, and it's different than what we have here. So I don't know, in this sheet, if because I feel like this is, this is also public facing, right, Nate? So I'm just thinking from the consumer protection side, and I guess also for the carrier, so there's no confusion. I don't know if it's an asterisk or some sort of, kind of disclaimer that localities might have their own rates, but this is just the maximum that they're allowed to charge, that is allowable under state law, just so that the consumer knows. And maybe that's something that if we did do a frequently asked questions, that could be included in. But so I know I'm getting more into the anyway, I don't mean to distract from the original question, which was, are these the categories that we are just getting consensus on the categories that we're going to be looking at. I only wanted to flag that some municipalities have different rates, and a lot of folks don't know that. And I don't know if there's a way that we can say that without getting into every single municipality per se, but maybe just a little flag on whatever public facing sheets that we're putting out. That's all.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I think we do try to add quite a bit of context, because I mean, the whole point of putting together this sheet was so that it could be just this, a nice single printable one pager that towing carriers can print out, or that consumers can print out and know exactly what rates should be the most that they're seeing. It could always be less in certain circumstances, but it shouldn't be more. And so that kind of was the idea behind that. Going to just the second page of this sheet, we kind of drill down into some of these specific rate categories. So for example, under the drop charge, we add some additional context here. So like I mentioned earlier, there is a prohibition on charging a drop fee for a residential tow. So that's this little note here, which says, as of August 10th, 2022, towing carriers can no longer assess a drop fee related to a residential private property tow. So anyway, I think we tried to kind of break down into that on some of these. This is the one for law enforcement. I don't know that we have the specific thing that you're talking about, where we indicate that less could potentially be charged. However, again, going up to the main page here, these are all maximum rates. I guess we could probably make that a little clearer. I thought it said something on here. Maybe we can add something, to the title here where it says maximum towing rates or something like that. But in the rule, they are referred to as maximum rates. And so, yeah, the whole premise of that is, you can always charge less. Now, most towing carriers don't charge less; they charge as much as they can. But it is something where it is listed as a maximum rate. So if a towing carrier is electing to charge less, there would be no problem with the PUC with them doing that. So if that makes any sense. So anyway. All right. Well, yeah, I think we can, Hadija, can you make a note, please, that we can maybe, put together some kind of a worksheet or something to go up on the website. And then maybe when we send out a reminder or something to the membership, we can include a link to that just so people know that it's there.
Okay, I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. And kind of just to tie up our conversation on law enforcement ordered tows and particular agencies sometimes wanting to assess a lesser fee. Captain Hahn, maybe you might have some thoughts on that. I know we've heard about that at times. I don't know how prevalent that is in the law enforcement community with different municipalities maybe wanting to, maybe just based on their community or their jurisdiction wanting to have their contracted towing carriers that are on rotation or whatnot, maybe charging a lesser rate. Captain, do you have any thoughts on that? Yes, Ms. Henson.
The only thought that I have that may not be on this list and it may not be anybody else, but the only thing I like, the rates across the board are all for like standard rolling vehicles. The only thing I run into sometimes is on private properties is when the vehicle does not have any wheels and tires, or like the motor and tranny are sitting on the ground. So for us to tow it, we have to bring ratchet straps and we have to hold up the motor and the tranny, and then we have to drag it around with no wheels on it and no tires, which could make, the job that should be an easy 45-minute, snatch and go to a 4-hour project. So it turns that $239 base rate, into very little money for a 4 or 5 hour project. It doesn't happen a lot. But when eviction processes happen is when we see more of that kind of thing. Is people will have evictions and they have all these project cars. And so the landlords and the banks are having everything removed. So then it takes us a whole day to do 3 or 4 private property impounds because they're all parts cars. And we still charge, of course, the base rate. But it does make it a problematic, very expensive day on my end to have my driver there for the entire day to put back these vehicles to make them able to be loaded. That's all I had on just, these are all for rolling vehicles, but I didn't know if there was a section where you could put complete cars and then maybe non-complete cars, kind of like when you take them to a scrapper, they give you a price for a complete vehicle and a non-complete vehicle if it doesn't have wheels and tires, or a catalytic converter because they're not complete vehicles anymore.
Okay. So one of your ideas potentially is to maybe take the private property impound base rate and split it into essentially 2 categories, which would be base rate for, I don't know, you said complete vehicles or intact vehicles, maybe. I mean, you'd have to figure out what terminology to use. And then obviously the inverse of that, whatever that might be, disabled vehicles or incomplete vehicles or deconstructed vehicles. I don't know what the terminology would be, but is that kind of, did I capture that okay? Or
Yeah. Things, especially without wheels and tires, are problematic. And I mean, we don't run into a ton of motors and trannies, but more wheels and tires than anything else are not on the vehicle anymore, which is the biggest problem. And it scratches the heck out of our beds. So it's the wear and tear on our trucks. It just scratches the heck out of everything. So those are the most problematic. Engines, motors, or engines, trannies here and there, wheels, especially this year. we've ran into people are stealing wheels and tires off of a lot of things. We're running into it more than we ever have in the past, is things, private properties without wheels and tires.
Okay. Like if you had to guess, you know, the percentage of vehicles that you encounter that you're going to be towing that kind of meet that threshold of being an incomplete vehicle versus the percentage of non-consensual tows that you do that actually are complete vehicles and don't have that same issue. Like, what do you think the percentage is for that? Like one versus the other?
Like 5%. It's not a lot.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. That's an interesting idea. All right. Any other thoughts on these categories? And again, I'll work with Hadija and we'll try to get something up on the website that kind of outlines these categories. Just real quickly, Mr. Roberts, I can't recall what our settled position was on this body's ability to weigh in on the maximum rates for law enforcement ordered and recovery tows, given the recent statutory change to the definition of a non-consensual tow, which is something that was altered and modified and amended pursuant to HB 22-1314 to include private property tows only. Do you think that precludes us from making any substantial recommendations regarding any changes to the maximum rates in the law enforcement ordered tow or recovery category?
No, I don't. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I had to change headsets. It wasn't working before. No, I don't think so. But the task force, everybody here needs to understand that if it's not something that we have explicit authority to do, then it will have dubious impact. You know, we can say we can make recommendations about what kind of bread we all need to have on our shelves to the PUC, and they'll just ignore us. It's kind of in the same type of category. We can make recommendations, but they don't have to listen.
Got it. Okay. Well, in that case, I'll go ahead and just put this whole all the data that's showing here probably onto a separate Google Doc that's modifiable, and we can provide commentary and all of that, and we'll go ahead and mark it in a way where it's accessible and commentary can be provided from the members of this group. However, I do think we'll make it viewable for everybody else. I do think that would limit access to that form for you being signed into your towing task force account. So your board, contractor, state email address. That's probably the only way we're going to be able to functionally do that. So just keep that in mind. If this is something you are inclined to access and provide, suggested edits or comments or whatever you want to do for these different categories, yeah, you'll probably have to be logged into your towing task force issued account in order to do that. That's probably how we'll set up the permissions in order to properly do this. So, but I have no problem with us doing this, and I think it'll be pretty simple to do. And like I said, once we put that together and it's up on the website and available and public and all of that, then we'll make sure everybody here is privy to that link to that document so that you can go in there and do whatever you want to do. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Go ahead and stop sharing my screen. All right. So I think we may have had a couple other people come in while we were talking. Looks like Mr. Connolly came in. Go ahead and mark that. Give me 1 second. I'm just kind of keeping track of who all's here for quorum purposes. Mr. Schoenheit, I believe, came in as well. Okay, so what does that give us? Hold on. All right, so that gives us 7. Unless, is Mr. Rich still here? He might have left, so we might still just have 6. All right. Well, yeah, we'll keep inching our way towards a quorum, hopefully before the end of the meeting, but we'll see what happens. All right. So moving on to the other point that I had on the agenda, which is, again, continued discussion on annual inflation adjustment metrics. I'm not sure if anybody else had any other thoughts on this. I know it's been probably a couple months since we've talked about this in depth, but we did just go through the annual inflation adjustment mechanism was applied for the 2023 calendar year just back in March. It was on March 15th was when that was assessed. So basically all the rates received that percentage bump at that time based on the CPI. Yeah, Mr. Conley, go ahead and jump in.
Do you know how much percentage raise that was? Wasn't it less than 4%?
No, it was more than that. Hold on. I believe it was so, and this was from March of this year. It was, yeah, so it happened on March 15th of this year, but it was based on the CPI for 2023, so the previous full calendar year, and it was 5.21%.
Okay.
For that inflation rate, is that just for like consumers, or does that take into account things like liability insurance and the insurance things that carriers have to have? If that has been factored into that, because the regular, just the CPI might only be like 3-4%, but liability insurance and workman's comp and things like that, if those have been at a higher rate.
Yeah, so my understanding, thanks for that question, Mr. Schoenheit. So basically my understanding of the metric that's being used and has been used since this annual inflation mechanism was first put into the rule back in, I think it was 2021, is that so what we use is the inflation CPI, so the consumer price index for Denver, Aurora, and Lakewood. We access those rates through the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, specifically the Division of Local Government. So we go to their website and it's just right there. In fact, I'll go ahead and include the link here in the chat here if you want to take a quick look at it. There you go. So this is where we get that is from this website. So basically you can see, and it goes back several years, it goes back all the way to 2016. So you can kind of see what it's been over the years. But in some of the initial text of right before it gets to those figures, it does indicate that it pulls this information from the BLS, the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it I think adds some splices. I think there's some kind of a modification to that data from the federal standard. But yeah, so this is what was elected to be used when the commission first put this metric in place a few years ago. So essentially the way the commission handles these annual inflation adjustments is that at the appropriate time per year, which is usually pretty close to when these figures come out. So basically it's usually in around late February is when CDOLA, the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, puts this stuff together and puts it and updates it on the website. That usually happens in about late February. So then the commission then takes a few weeks to kind of put everything together and modify the rates. And those go into effect on March 15th. Now, looking at some of these numbers, again, it doesn't really boil down too deep into what they are. It's just a percentage. It says, 2023, the CPI value is this figure, and that means the percentage change is, and then there's a percentage. But that's the percentage that the commission has been using. So again, what we have discussed, over these past couple of years at various intervals is this, first off, is an annual inflation adjustment an appropriate metric to have in place in the first place? That's the first question. And then the second is the CPI that's currently being used through CDOLA the best metric to use? And again, I've gotten feedback from my team, who's out there in the field talking to different carriers, in this case, towing carriers. And, they have gotten some feedback on this, and some people like it and some people don't like it. Some people think that some carriers like getting that little bump every year, as opposed to the old method, which was going through a rulemaking every 3, 4, 5 years, and doing it that way. But then there are other carriers that, while they may like the adjustment mechanism, they don't like the percentage. They don't think the percentage is the most appropriate one to use, or maybe it's something as simple as, oh, it's not high enough, or whatever the case may be. So anyway, did you have any other additional thoughts, Mr. Schoenheit?
No, that breaks it down pretty well, as far as the increases per year. I mean, based on like fuel and insurance and maintenance and all the things that go into that. I don't know if the rates would be able to be able to handle that if, let's say, they went up, 5 to 8% automatically every year. That would grow pretty fast within 5 years, for the rates.
Sure. Yeah, and I know I've said this before, which is, I just as my personal opinion, having seen and participated in some of these rulemakings in the past where rates were changed and things like that, it's a laborious exercise. It really is a lot. So something that's a little more automatic, that provides some rate adjustment to the carriers on more of a routine basis, with not a lot of additional process needed on top of that. I definitely can see the value and benefit of doing it that way, and not just for the towing industry. I could see that potentially working in a lot of different industries. Of course, as I've said before in numerous meetings, when they put it into effect, with it, I think, taking effect in 2021, it probably wasn't the best time to try something like this, because of all the historic inflation and stuff that happened after 2020. And so while the idea itself may be sound, we may still be feeling the effects of that skewed period post 2020, when the numbers haven't quite settled yet. So I see your point, Mr. Schoenheit, about continued high percentage increases every year, and how that can certainly have an effect on a compounded basis as we move through these years, which is kind of how this works. So I definitely recognize that. And, I've been anxiously waiting to see if some of these CPI numbers are going to, start trending down again. And that's, I think, one of the values of the CDOLA website, is it goes all the way back to 2016. So you can kind of see what things were leading up to 2020 and then post 2020. And you definitely see the stark differences there. So, you can obviously take that into consideration when you're thinking about this issue. But it's definitely an issue that is on the table, I think, for us as the towing task force, because, again, it's our job to provide valued feedback to the commission for them to make what we feel are the best policy decisions when it comes to setting these maximum rates. Yeah, Ms. Henson.
Is there any other systems out there that deal more with industrial, where it comes into like commercial property, commercial insurance, commercial trucks, anything that doesn't deal with so much food prices or gas prices? I mean, more just diesel, more of what the industry actually is, because I feel like it has some to do with the rest, but our industry is kind of different. So it took insurance took a 26% hike this year when I renewed. So I know, the 5% is kind of low in our industry. I'm not sure if it is for everybody. Maybe it's because we're of my location too. I'm not also in a big city. I'm in a smaller city. So things seem to be more expensive over here. So I'm not sure if there's one that does a broader range or does more with industrial, commercial property. We've been trying to buy a property for years, but everything is so expensive. We can't even come close to affording anything around here because everything hikes up every year, more out of reach. So if there's anything, there's systems that kind of are more in all of the towing industry. I don't know if that would be something to look at.
Yeah, I just ran a search for industrial consumer price index, and the only thing that came up for me was the CPI home at BLS for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I know we've already kind of looked at that a little bit, you know, as a metric that could potentially be more appropriate. But, you know, so, some of these CPIs we've been looking at in previous meetings, some of them are, you know, the websites that govern those indexes are some of them are just more user friendly than others, and the data sets are more accessible. They're easier to manipulate and kind of get to where you want to get to, and some aren't. Some of them are just not very user friendly. I mean, it's difficult to even tell what the information means in some cases. So
Could we build our own?
I mean, we'd have to figure out what to base. I mean that would essentially. I mean, it would depend on what you mean by building our own. If you mean like coming up with our own data sets, that might be a little trickier. I know that's something maybe potentially similar may have been done, you know, by a previous, you know, task force group. You know, when they did that entire rate restructuring back in 2015, because I've seen some of those charts, and I know we've circulated them. I'm pretty sure they're up on the website for anybody to look at, where it kind of breaks out by different fee categories. But that, I don't know that that was like a percentage increase mechanism. That was just what it was in that particular moment. And what I believe a lot of that data also was pulled from another state, potentially, you know, at least in how it was structured. So, but yeah, I haven't really heard a lot, you know, over these past couple of years when this comes up. I don't know that I've heard a lot of pushback to the fact that the commission has adopted an annual inflation adjustment mechanism for the tow rates. I don't know that I've heard a lot of pushback on that. Yeah, Mr. Conley.
Well, and it's actually, we never had an annual increase, and it always took forever to get an increase. So anybody that's been in the business for, you know, more than a decade knows the old ways. And so the CPI doesn't capture everything the industry goes through. So like equipment has gone up almost double in the last 2 years. Insurance is hitting a hard market again. It's going up. Multiple carriers are complaining anywhere from 30 to 60% increases. But the CPI does capture your personnel. So at least it's something. We had a meeting last night, and PUC had forgotten to take out the rate structure from the old rate structure that was back in 2014. And so that rate structure took effect in 2016, and there was an oopsie that didn't get taken out. Well, it finally got taken out officially, what, the 30th, Nate?
Yes, sir.
And he was proud of that. And I thought, you know, it only took 8 years. That's how fast things work in the past. So 8 years. Well, I tell you what, we can't wait 8 years for an increase or a change, or, you know, before we were lucky to get an increase every 4 years. So most of the towing community is okay with taking a small increase that's personnel based only every year. At least it's helping fill the gap of where the problem is. Is it perfect? No, but it is a lot better than nothing. So, and we have done a lot of research trying to find something that can capture your insurance markets and your equipment markets and things like that. And there's just nothing out there other than getting quotes from local insurance and local truck dealers to show the cost. And there's no other way to do it. So hope that helps shed some light on it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that feedback. And I am a little curious if you want to expand. I know earlier you had asked what that percent, the CPI percentage was increased for the 2023 calendar year, which took effect on March 15th. And you said you thought it was less than 4%, and I shared that it was actually 5.21% was that increase. Like, what's your reaction to that? Just speaking as a larger towing carrier in the state, what's your reaction to that 5.21% increase? Do you think that's good, not good enough?
Well, I think it's low looking at the costs of what we endure with our comp insurance, our truck insurance, and equipment costs. Those have gone up so drastically that there's no way to capture that without doing you would have to do a complete survey within the industry to show that increase. And that's a mechanism that's not in place yet. But hopefully with the House Bill 1051, and if PUC pays attention and listens to some of the industry leaders, we can say, this is how you can capture this information. And if we can capture that information, then we have something to go off of. Because I know some people like me, but a lot of people don't care what John says. And even though I have proof and I can show it to them, they don't always trust me. So there are certain things that you can get from the towers that can show you that, 2 years ago, I was buying light duty wreckers for 95 to 100,000. Today, those same wreckers are 150 to 175. That's 2 years. And you're not going to find that on any website somewhere. I don't know how else to show that to you other than give you the manufacturer. Here's the price they're selling them for.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where it gets a little tricky, in trying to find this aggregate data that's the most applicable it can be, without veering off into some weird lane. And I think that's part of, the complexity of this is that when we talk about some of these other types of CPI metrics or similar indexes that we can use to try to get something that's a little more, appropriate or accurate towards what the towing industry is actually experiencing in regards to price increases from year to year. In some cases, these are federal databases, and in those cases, again, it may be splicing in data sets from areas that don't really or aren't really seeing the same thing. So that could potentially water down that overall percentage, whatever it is, wherever we find it. I will admit I like the simplicity of the CDOLA CPI metric that we use. It is specific. Well, it's not completely specific, but at least it's relatively specific to our area in that it captures Denver, Aurora, and Lakewood. So, essentially the Denver metro area, more or less. And so it kind of centralizes it to where, admittedly, we have our largest concentration of towing carriers. I'd say most towing carriers that are licensed that operate in the state probably operate somewhere in the Denver metro area. Most of them, not all of them, of course. We got plenty of towing carriers operating in outlying areas. Like Miss Henson operating out in Grand Junction. People operate down in Pueblo or up in Salida or wherever. So, there's towing carriers all over the state. It's just, if we're talking about our highest concentration, I would say that probably most of them operate in the Denver metro area, just because it's the most populous area and most concentrated population area. So that's where people, need a lot of towing services. So I do like the simplicity in that, it's a single number. It's in the same place on the same website. It's more locally defined, a more locally defined metric, or at least it's supposed to be. And so, I do like the simplicity of that. But again, at the same time, if there is something even at the federal level that seems like a better, more accurate, more tailored towards the towing industry metric to use somewhere as part of some index or CPI somewhere else on some other website or some other government agency is putting out there, definitely open to that. Yeah, Ms. Henson.
Yeah, just on the everybody, I mean, there is most population over in Denver metro area. So it is much more like affordable in the Denver metro area too. So like kind of us on the outskirts, we're not as high of numbers as operations, but we're a lot higher when it comes to maintenance, getting trucks, all that kind of thing, because we have to run to Denver to go to Lynch to get some of our trucks fixed. So just to go to the shop, we have to drive 257 miles. And then also to try and get amenities in the areas like this of truck parts, things like that too. If our truck goes down, we have to order parts. We're waiting for weeks to get parts. So I think there's most of the operations are over there, but us that are kind of, there's a lot of people, you know, Delta, Montrose, these small areas with all of us small numbers, we do add up to a decently okay number. And we are, it's just more expensive for us. So I think if we had a different, more of a whole Colorado average instead of Denver metro, it might average out a little bit better if there is a way of looking at that.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and let's look and check and see who all we have here now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay. Sorry, just keeping track of who all's here for potential quorum. I think we're still 1 or 2 short. Okay. Well, yeah. You know, I do enjoy, you know, talking about some of these issues, and kind of seeing how people feel about it, because I do think, you know, the whole annual inflation adjustment, that mechanism is probably one of the biggest things that the and most innovative things the commission has tried, probably in the towing industry, or really any of its industries, probably for a while. And so, you know, I like us keeping an eye on this, you know, to see, you know, if we think it's working, you know, if we think it's meeting that need, you know, to not go through these potentially long periods of time that are where there essentially is no modification or amendment to the maximum rates that are allowed to be charged. And just to clarify for everybody, you know, I mean, we do try to, you know, get this out there when these changes happen, when these annual inflation adjustments happen. We try to, you know, send out messages to all the active towing carriers, letting them know that the rates have changed. You know, same with the recent rulemaking. You know, we try to send out an email blast about that. You know, we try to get the consumers all on the same page, where they're looking in the right place for these rates, to make sure they're on the same page on what potentially could be charged for various services, and all of that. But you know, it is something that people sometimes get a little lost in. And, you know, as much as I'd like to simplify some of this stuff, you know, it is a complex industry, and it does have a complex regulatory structure, especially after the bill 2 years ago. And so, you know, we're trying to keep all this stuff nice and streamlined and accessible and transparent for anybody who has interest in the information, whether it's the towing carriers, other stakeholders, consumers. You know, we want to make it as simplified as we can. But and that's really what this whole one-page, you know, fee sheet was about, was really simplifying it. Previous versions of that same information was a lot more complex and a lot easier to get lost in. And so we're trying to simplify a lot of these things to make it easier to understand for everybody, you know, what they could potentially be charged for, why, you know, all of that we're trying to get out there in these fee sheets, you know, in a simplified and pretty straightforward manner. And I think in the most part, we do succeed in that, but, you know, there are still people who call and they're confused and they're not sure about something, you know, which can lead to extra work, because, you know, they may file a complaint when maybe they don't need to, because actually the correct rate was was charged, but they don't understand that because they're not understanding the fee sheet. So, we take that feedback when we get it, and we try to make modifications and streamline it all a little bit better to, every time somebody calls and tells us something, it's just another piece of information that we can use to try to clean up some of the information that we have and that we have out there for public consumption. So anyway, all right. Well, yeah, I think that, we can continue talking about, the potential inflation adjustment metrics. And, if we happen to stumble across one, I know John said earlier, we've done a lot of research trying to poke into some of these ones we've heard about, and kind of poke around in the websites and, look up the charts and the figures and the data and, see if something's standing out amongst the rest. I don't know that I've seen anything that totally blows the CDOLA CPI out of the water just yet. But, I try to keep an open mind with that stuff because, if all of a sudden we do come across something and it looks like it's just a better fit, great. Let's toy with that a little bit. And if it truly is a better fit, then great. We got a potential recommendation we can make to the commission on, hey, you've been using the CDOLA CPI, maybe consider using this instead. We think that it might be better because of, X, Y, Z, whatever our justification or reasoning is. So, that I think is, meets our role in giving them guidance in some of these policy considerations. So, all right. Well, let me go back to the agenda here. Okay. So I think we've hit two of those items that, the continued conversation on the different tow categories. Again, we'll follow up with that and get something up on the website that people can kind of poke around in and, submit commentary or whatever else we want to, talk about when it comes to those tow categories. We'll go ahead and get that up on the website for you all to go in there and, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to say. And then, yeah, again, for this annual inflation adjustment metric, keep fishing around. I'll keep fishing around, whoever else wants to go poking around in some of those ones we've talked about in the past, or, if you just want to do your own independent research and see if you can find something that you think you'd like to talk about or explore in this kind of a public setting with a lot of us here to kind of bounce ideas off of. I think that's a great idea. And I think it's something we can continue to discuss moving forward. All right. Well, let's see. We had an open discussion point, so that's kind of anything and everything, whatever y'all might want to talk about. I don't think we had anybody sign up for public comment. Is that correct, Khadija? Khadija, nobody signed up to talk today, right?
Yeah, there's no public comments.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see anybody in the meeting. Nobody signed up on our sheet, and I'm not seeing anybody that I don't recognize in the call today. So don't think we have any public comments. So yeah, I'll go ahead and just open it up. Let's see, it's about 3:20 right now. But yeah, is there anything else anybody wants to discuss? Any other ideas you want to throw out there? Just really any other talking points you might want to throw out there for the benefit of the group? Feel free to do so now.
I had a question. Do you think we should lower the meeting count to once every other month, once every 3 months or something? Because I feel like we haven't had a quorum in how long?
Yeah, it's been a little while. February, I think. So it's been a couple months.
Yeah, are we just having two meetings too often? Are we we're just not? I know I feel like I feel without the flashbang in the media, there's not a lot of pressure, therefore there's not a lot of energy. That's just my personal feeling. That's how I feel.
Okay. Mr. Schoenheit, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I would just say that, I know we're all busy professionals and, for the folks that are signed on to the, towing task force, that, the meeting times, in the afternoon might be a little bit difficult depending on if they've got other commitments and conflicts. Whether it was going to be, at a more opportune time, that might help that. I do agree with, the fact now that the legislative session has kind of burned itself into oblivion, that, this is probably not as a hot topic as it was. But I would say along with that is, and this happened in a couple other issues and I guess industries, is that, a lot of the feedback, I guess the legislative process outran the commissions, and they, as far as the input that we were able to provide, I know it's limited in this case, but, they're going to set up the commissions, and they should probably try to let the commissions, run through some of these things to get good discussion and take the industry feedback in earnest from all the parties, before they blaze a trail with the legislation. And then, at the end of it, the commissions is kind of sitting around, trying to figure out what's left to discuss and go over.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for your comments, Mr. Schoenheit. So here's my thought on this, and I'm happy to hear anybody else who wants to jump in on this. But so my thought on it is I'm not opposed to meeting less frequently. I know we've kind of, for the past couple of years, we've kind of settled into this, once a month groove. And there's been instances where, maybe we had work groups that, where you'd be maybe seeing the same people more than once a month. That's happened, a few times back in 2022, I know. But yeah, no, I'm not opposed to meeting less frequently. I guess my concern to that would just be, I'd hate to push it back to, just once every other month, for example, or maybe even once a quarter, and it's still just the same people coming or the same people not coming, I guess would be my thing. So if we're still running into quorum issues, even though we're spacing the meetings out more, that would be my concern, that we'd still be falling into the same traps, where we just don't have enough people for a quorum. And to be fair, it is difficult and has been difficult to recruit people to this group, because unlike some other boards and commissions, that are part of this department, not only do we have to find people who are actually willing to volunteer the time to participate in this group, but also, we have to find people that fit a very specific box pursuant to the statute for a specific membership role. So, you compound those two factors together, and it's really, at times, it's really hard to find people who, one, even want to do it, and two, if they do want to do it, can we actually fit them into one of these membership slots that says they are essentially obligated to represent a particular community or interest group? I mean, you compound those two things together, and it's hard to find people. So, in some cases we've had resignations, and it's taken a long time to replace them, and that's why. So yeah. Anyway, so I would really, hope for more engagement, and I can, people from the PUC and the department can try to help with that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely hear the comments, both from you, Mr. Conley, and you, Mr. Schoenheit, about, the excitement, going down and things like that. It does happen, and it's easy to get really, geared up and jazzed up about something, when it's legislative session and there's pending legislation. And that's another thing we're going to have to talk about in the near future. That tow bill did just pass, HB 241051, and it specifically made modifications to our statute. Now, of course, the governor still has to sign it. It still has to become effective, all of that. But, that's another thing we're going to have to talk about probably in the near future, with some guidance from Mr. Roberts on what all we might need to change or modify in order to accommodate those changes. So that's something we'll probably have to do in the near future. Okay. Any other thoughts on, let's just entertain for a moment, moving to an every other month schedule. What are people's thoughts on that? Oh, everybody jumps in at once. Let's start with you, Captain Han.
Yeah, I think that idea of doing that, there's a number of other bodies that I'm a part of that where that's the approach that we take, that we meet every other month or as needed. I mean, I think nothing would prevent us if there was something significant that came along that we needed to get the band together. Granted, this is on the calendar for every month, and it's hard enough to get a quorum, but yeah, I would be supportive of looking at less frequent, as needed, and maybe seeing if, to Mr. Connolly's point, if it were every other month, people being able to better accommodate that in their schedules, and then see if that helps us with getting a quorum. I think it's at least worth exploring. The question I had was, remind me what our requirements are. What are the minimum number of times that we need to meet?
Twice a year.
Twice a year. Yeah, I think twice a year probably doesn't work. But I think maybe looking at something that is less often, at least trying every other month would be something I would be supportive of.
Okay. Ms. Rusha.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. I was gonna suggest that instead of just jumping to cutting our meetings in half like that, we consider having a 90-minute, like going to 90 minutes, and then in our agendas that we have like task items or intended outcomes, so we might be able to get more done in less time. And then if it looks like we should, reduce our number of meetings, maybe instead of cutting them in half completely, it's something like 8 times a year versus 6 times a year. But I just wanted to suggest that we try doing scheduling for 90 minutes for the next one. But having just like very clear um, intended outcomes, so that way members know what they need to be prepared for, and then what we know we need to get done in that 90 minutes.
Okay. That's valuable feedback. Mr. Schoenheit?
Just two things. I'm good either way for whether it was, every month or every other month, but, maybe potentially look at, like, the summer breaks, between like the June, July period of having the break if necessary. Obviously, because that's probably going to be the hardest portion during the summertime to get folks. And then just the time, as far as when the meeting is held, that's probably one of the maybe the potentially harder impacts when it's midday. So that'd be my only comments.
Got it. Okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts on it for now? Agree on breaks, summer and December. December is probably not the worst idea because yeah, it's definitely a lot of people have a lot of things going on, and end of year stuff. For me, it's legislative reports, but other people might have holidays and stuff. Who knows? But okay. Well, that's all valuable feedback. Well, let's go ahead and look at the calendar here and kind of see what we might be thinking. So if we were to stick on our regular schedule, which has been the second Wednesday of every month, that would put our next meeting on June 12th. If we were to move to an every other month, that would put us on July 10th instead. Let's see. Okay, so Ms. Rusha is suggesting potentially taking breaks in August and December and changing our meetings so that they are 90 minutes as opposed to 2 hours. And obviously they take only as long as they take. I mean, we're at 90 minutes right now. And I think we're pretty wound down on this meeting. Okay. Sorry, I'm just kind of trying to sort this out in my head a little bit. So if we were to do it that way, we would still have a June and July meeting, kind of following the same scheduling as we have in the past, taking August off, then having September, October, November, and then taking December off. How does everybody feel about that? Yeah, Ms. Henson.
I would prefer to have if we're going to do some time off in the summer, just because I do have kiddos and we do travel more in the summer when school's out. So, for me, the only 2 months that we really have is June and July. They're back in school in August. So we really try to camp and do the outdoors thing. And we aren't here a lot in the summer. So for just, a mom, it would be, and a family, summers are kind of busy.
Sure. Okay. So what if we then change that to, instead of August, taking a break in August, take a break in July as opposed to August and December. So then that would mean we'd have our next meeting in June, then July off, then resuming in August, and we'd have August, September, October, November. That's 4 meetings, and then taking another break in December.
That sounds good to me. I just dropped in the chat. I completely understand that comment. My kiddo is grown and flown, so I just sometime in the summer it would be good for a break, especially for working families. So that sounds good to me.
Got it. Okay. Okay. That's all good feedback. I mean, how does everybody feel about our 2 p.m. start time? I mean, if we're gonna potentially shorten the meeting to 90 minutes, which I'm fine with, would y'all prefer it to maybe start a little later, like maybe at 3 o'clock? Or I mean, what do y'all think would encourage people to participate more, I guess, would be my question. Yeah, Ms. Henson.
And I can't do much later because I have bus stops to pick up kiddos. So I'm kind of pushing it at 4 o'clock. The bus is here at 4:15. So I run out the door as soon as we're done.
Okay.
Maybe in the morning would be a bit easier for everybody. I don't know. I could kind of, like a 9:30 or a 10 a.m. or something would be a little bit easier for me. So I'm not fighting the afternoon, and I could go stay in my home office and then run to the yard after my meeting instead of running back and then to the bus and back and forth. That's my opinion.
Okay. Captain Hahn?
Yeah, I think earlier in the day is better. I mean, I think if probably everybody on in this meeting would agree that, when you start your workday doesn't get, the fires don't get fewer as you go on in the day. The day that any of my other meetings that I set, my staff meetings, other standing meetings I have them set earlier in the day just so that I don't have the opportunity for the day to get away from me, fires to crop up just yet. And usually if everybody else's life is a bit like mine, it seems like the 2 or 3 o'clock hour is when things really start to come to a head. If there's going to be a crisis, it always seems like it's going to be in the afternoon. Maybe that's just me, but I suspect that's probably everybody else's case. So earlier in the day is probably better, I think.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that, Mr. Connolly, Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, I'm as long as it's past the rush hour, I'm fine. That's my busy times are rush hours, morning and night. So anywhere from 9 o'clock in the morning till, about 3 in the afternoon. Yes, the afternoon is normally worse.
As long as you stay on Wednesday, Nate, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, and I'd probably prefer to stay on Wednesdays as well, just because I mean that. Yeah, Ms. Rusha, go ahead.
Sorry, I might be the outlier here. If we need to replace me with someone else, to represent disabled Coloradans, like to make this happen, I would understand. But Wednesdays are actually they're not the best days for me to have external meetings. And we have just at work, we have meetings this time of mid-month on Wednesdays. So I wouldn't be able to do earlier.
I would be happy to wrap up our meetings earlier, but I wouldn't be able to get to these meetings any earlier. I think 1:30 for me would be pushing it to have an earlier start date, which is why I was proposing we just really tighten our agenda and have, and try to work through like expected outcomes and then keep it to 90 minutes or less. But I might be, again, it might just be me. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the hardest days for me to get out because we already have meetings scheduled. Because at our workplace, fires tend to happen in the afternoon. So we get our meetings done early.
Got it. Okay. Well, tell you what, let's, I don't want to make any sharp decisions right now, but let's go ahead and we'll schedule our next meeting. We'll stay on regular track, at least for next month. So that would put us at June 12th, Wednesday. We'll go ahead and keep it at 2, but we'll reduce it to a 90-minute. So 2 to 3:30. We'll go ahead and do that for this next month. But over the course of this next month, be thinking about this some more, and we can have another conversation about this. I'll make a note now. In fact, let me do that while I'm still thinking of it. We can make a note to talk a little bit more about scheduling. Again, frequency, days, times, and that way it's not such a spur of the moment conversation. We can kind of take some time to think about what our ideal situation would be, and maybe there's going to be some overlap with other people, and maybe people who weren't here today will be here next month, and we can get their input as well. Yeah. Did you have anything else, Mr. Raja?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for the conversation and all the talking points today. Definitely appreciate that. Like I said, our next meeting will be June 12th we'll start at regular time, 2 p.m. We'll run towards 3:30. So it'll be 90 minutes instead of the usual 2 hours. And like I said, in over the course of these next, 4 weeks or so, just be thinking about any adjustments we might want to make to the frequency of the meetings, the days and the times. I think this was a good first conversation to that topic. But I think we can just think about it a little bit and then come back next month and really flesh out that conversation. So, all right. Anything else anybody wants to chat about before we adjourn? Okay. Hearing none, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. The recording of this meeting will be up on the website probably before the end of the week. Again, we'll go ahead and let y'all know when that fee sheet is up on the website for you to take a look at and comment on. We'll let y'all know when that's available, so you can go in there and poke around if you want to. Otherwise, everybody have a great rest of your month. Legislative session is over. I'm sure plenty of us are happy about that. It's always a very busy time for a lot of us. So enjoy the rest of your month, and we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.